In this narrated PowerPoint, I'll briefly address the function and importance of the Recreation Opportunity Spectrum, or ROS as it's called. Its legislative and conceptual origins, and I'll explain how it's used and how we'll use it in class. So ROS is an inventory of experience opportunities. It goes beyond activities to experiences. It goes beyond a site border to regional level analysis. And it helps develop a supply of recreation experience categories to set management guidelines and help plan. As you're reading details, you develop the ROS inventory map according to the ROS criteria. Physically, we're looking at remoteness, size, and evidence of humans. On the social side, we're looking at the density of encounters. And on the managerial side, we're looking at regimentation, or rules and regulations. The inventory identifies what is, and then you can think about what can be. What's the potential of this area? So according to well-respected researchers, the ROS has been identified as the most widely recognized recreation management concept around the world, and probably the single most influential concept in recreation management and planning for public lands and protected areas. That's what McCool and others said in 2007. And as you'll read about now, or have already read about, the ROS has been used across the globe by various agencies like the National Park Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and the USDA Forest Service. Within and across agencies, the ROS has been tweaked and adapted for specific uses to wilderness, water, tourism, ecotourism, and even spirituality. The key is to understand what the existing setting is versus what the desired setting is, so that the management actions either maintain what exists or narrows the gap between the existing and the desired setting. So knowing how important the ROS is and its function, you might wonder, why and how was the ROS developed? So although there is not explicit legislation that mandates organizations to use the ROS, managing for a diversity of recreation and considering the recreation setting is supported and implicit in at least 2 federal acts. It was also recommended by the Outdoor Recreation Review Commission in the early 1960s. So first off, the Multiple Use and Sustained Yield Act of 1960 noted that the U.S. Forest Service must recognize outdoor recreation as a main use. Also, in the early 1960s, the Outdoor Recreation Resources Review Commission report recognized a spectrum of recreation opportunities was important for public recreation. Finally, the National Forest Management Act in the mid-1970s required that forest plans provide for outdoor recreation opportunities and that timber harvests consider the effects of their effects on recreation. So although not mandated, the importance of a spectrum of recreation opportunity experiences was recognized early on. Conceptually, the ROS recognized that unlike other types of forest products and natural resource products where success is measured by increased numbers of timber, wood, fish, or grazing, increased participation in outdoor recreation isn't always desired or preferred. There can be too many. This idea of social carrying capacity becomes really important. So now facility carrying capacity is familiar to us. It's simply how many people or things can physically and safely fit into a space. You might think of fire codes as an example of this. The concept of social carrying capacity is the point at which impacts of a visitor use violate the standards of quality. Social carrying capacity considers the human experience and the qualities important to it. In recreation settings, the visitor experience is influenced by the environmental and managerial settings. So whereas a number of boats might be too many for some, it might be too few for others. I've linked you to an example video here where capacity was used to argue about motorized recreation management in Canada. You can pause this recording to view this 4-minute YouTube video that focuses on the allocation of recreation opportunities for motorized and non-motorized use. This is an ongoing issue in recreation management. So as you've read about and the video illustrates, clearly there's a need to allocate recreation opportunities by experiences. So how is this done? With the recreation opportunity spectrum. So as your readings detail, a set of steps is used to implement the ROS, including the opportunity to put together a team with expertise, to determine what existing information is there and what is missing, to review the legal and political constraints, to map the existing information, develop preliminary existing recreation resource maps, checking them, and then to develop existing recreational resources maps that identify other resources and facilities so you can have a regional approach. With all of this information, using these steps, you can then develop your ROS inventory map according to the criteria. Again, the inventory describes what is, and then you can think of what can be, what the potential is based on the physical, social, and managerial settings. Based on that information, you'll classify the area into an ROS class. So this diagram includes the original and the modified ROS classes. The originals are in regular and red font, while the modified classes are in parentheses and the purple font. I've included an abbreviated example from the Bureau of Land Management in this week's readings, and we'll discuss others in class. As a reminder, Moore et al. Modified this ROS for use in the eastern United States and non-federal areas by changing that roaded natural to semi-developed natural and the rural to developed natural, and then further differentiating urban into highly developed. Whatever agency you work with will identify which ROS system that you're going to use, and you'll have a choice of which one you want to use in the final project as well. The USDA Forest Service actually includes even more specific information on an inventory protocol to lead to these designated classes. The 6 steps that they've completed include identifying the motorized and non-motorized areas by buffering a road a half a mile, then classifying these non-motorized areas as primitive or semi-primitive based on how many miles it is from the road, mapping the semi-primitive motorized areas, applying the size criteria of 5,000, 2,500, etc., and then checking adjacent areas for categorization. Is it primitive, semi-primitive non-motorized, or semi-primitive motorized, recognizing that you need to buffer primitive areas, and then differentiating between those on the other end of the spectrum by level of development. When you do that, you'll end up with a map that looks like something from this example. When agencies are considering implementation of the ROS, beyond following that protocol, 3 things agencies need are commitment, technical skills, and information. And you can imagine acquiring and then implementing the information in the process takes both time and money, which is sometimes in short supply in natural resource agencies. But despite the challenges of ROS implementation, it remains significant to recreation management and planning, which is why we're studying it. In this class, you'll use it as an example and exercise in the class. You'll use it for the final project to classify the final project area along this continuum, and you may even use it in your personal life to choose the recreation opportunities you seek. So hopefully you know a little bit more about the recreation opportunity spectrum, its importance, and its recognition as one of the most widely recognized recreation management tools around the world. You know how we'll use it in this class. I look forward to seeing you in class.